Gold and silver were supposed to make Spain unstoppable. Instead, they slowly poisoned its empire from the inside out. When galleons heaved into Seville, loaded with treasure ripped from the Americas, it looked like Spain had won history's lottery. But that river of wealth came with a curse. It convinced a rising superpower that it could buy greatness instead of building it. How Spain handled its sudden riches is a masterclass in how greed, short-term thinking, and arrogance can quietly destroy an empire. To see the collapse coming, you have to start with the jackpot, the mines of the New World. After conquering vast territories in the 16th century, Spain tapped places like Potosi in modern Bolivia and Zacatecas in Mexico, where mountains seemed to be made of pure silver. Ship after ship crossed the Atlantic stuffed with bullion. For a while it worked like a dream. The crown paid its soldiers, funded its wars, and dazzled Europe with displays of royal splendor that screamed power. But underneath all that glitter, Spain was hollowing itself out. In theory, all that money should have turned Spain into the manufacturing and financial hub of Europe. In practice, it did the exact opposite. Why bother building a strong domestic economy when you can simply unload silver in Antwerp or Genoa and import whatever you need? Spanish nobles looked down on trade and industry. Real status was in land, titles, and the king's favor. So the gold paid foreign merchants, foreign shipbuilders, and foreign bankers, while Spain's own productive muscles withered away from lack of use. Greed also meant the crown could never get enough. Spain's rulers treated American silver like an infinite credit card and Europe as their shopping mall. They fought costly wars in Italy, the Low Countries, and against the Ottoman Empire, convinced that defending Catholic supremacy was worth any bill as long as someone else eventually paid it. That someone else turned out to be the future of the Spanish state. The more treasure arrived, the more Spain borrowed against it. Bankers happily extended credit, knowing another fleet was always on the way until storms. Piracy, or mismanagement, intervened, and suddenly there wasn't enough silver to cover the promises. The result was a cycle of staggering bankruptcies. Spain defaulted on its debts repeatedly, each time shaking European finance and shredding its own credibility. Meanwhile, at home, ordinary Spaniards were being crushed by a quieter, everyday form of greed: inflation. Pouring oceans of silver into Europe didn't just make Spain rich on paper. It made money itself worth less. Prices soared. If you were a landowner collecting rent, you could keep up for a while. But if you were a soldier, a craftsman, or a laborer whose wages lagged behind, the empire's glittering wealth translated into emptier bowls and thinner shoes. Spain's rulers, flush with bullion, preferred to tax and squeeze rather than reform. They expelled entire productive communities, most famously the Moriscos, converted Muslims, in the early 17th century because religious and political purity mattered more than economic common sense. This greed for conformity, for control, for a pure Catholic society, stripped the empire of farmers, artisans, and taxpayers it desperately needed. And while Spain clung to old privileges, its rivals quietly did the hard work Spain avoided. England and the Dutch Republic couldn't match Spain's treasure fleets, so they built something else: flexible commercial networks, strong maritime industries, and financial systems that rewarded investment instead of birthright. When silver prices dipped or fleets were lost, those countries adjusted. When Spain's flow of bullion faltered, there was almost nothing underneath to catch the fall. The military edge that treasure had once bought began to dull. Over time, Spain struggled to pay and supply its armies. Mutinies erupted, fortresses were abandoned, and enemies learned that if they could just hold out long enough, Spanish resolve would crumble under unpaid bills. The empire still looked vast on a map, stretching from Manila to Mexico, but more and more of that dominion existed only on paper. By the 18th century, reformers could see the problem clearly. Spain needed to diversify its economy, encourage local industry, and treat its American possessions as more than mines to be milked. But centuries of easy money had built bad habits that were almost impossible to break. Raised on the illusion that empire meant endless wealth, Spain had few tools left for a world where power depended on productivity and innovation, not bullion stacked in a vault. In the early 19th century, that weakness met its reckoning. Napoleon's invasion shattered royal authority. Across the Atlantic, Creole elites in Spanish America saw their chance. They were tired of sending silver and taxes to a distant crown that offered rigid control and little modernization in return. Independence movements erupted, led not by foreign invaders, but by the very colonial elites Spain had long assumed were loyal. When the dust settled, Spain was left with a handful of islands and memories of greatness, its once mighty empire reduced to a cautionary tale. The irony is brutal. The very treasures that seemed to guarantee endless power ended up undermining the discipline, investment, and flexibility an empire needs to survive. Spain didn't collapse because it was too poor. It collapsed, slowly and painfully, because it was rich in exactly the wrong way. Its rulers mistook plunder for prosperity and gold for a substitute for hard choices. And that is how greed really destroys empires. Not with one dramatic act of theft, but with centuries of taking the easy reward and postponing every reform until there's nothing left to spend and nowhere left to fall. Spain's story is that warning, written in silver. Thanks for watching. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history. See you next time.